Hello and welcome to our webinar today. We are delighted to work with partners from the Australian Government and the Queensland Government to present an update on the Australia-Singapore Military Training Initiative in the Townsville, North Queensland area. Today we're working with partners to be able to showcase the economic development opportunities and future works available to our local businesses. Regional Development Australia actually works very closely with all levels of government and the private sector to facilitate and advocate for regional economic development. So we're delighted to be hosting this today in partnership with the Australian Government's Department of Defence and the Queensland Government's Defence Hub based in Townsville. It's now my pleasure to introduce the panellists and speakers for today. We're starting with Mick Riley, the ASMTI Business Liaison Officer. Mick is an experienced executive leader and board director with an extensive background consulting in a wide range of industries and government agencies. With extensive experience in defence, Mick has a deep understanding of the military links within Queensland. He has served on boards within the region, including as President of the Townsville Chamber, Board Director at Townsville Enterprise, and as President of Legacy in Townsville. Mick's role with ASMTI is to liaise with communities, local leaders, local businesses and industry in North Queensland and Central Queensland to provide up-to-date information on the developments associated with the training areas and opportunities arising from them. Secondly, I'd like to introduce David. David Patterson is a project manager with Oricon and has over 20 years' experience working with defence and 12 years specifically on defence capital facilities and infrastructure projects across Queensland. David is also the project manager on the Land 4502 project, delivering facilities for the Chinook helicopter project for 5th Aviation Regiment at RAF Base in Townsville. Yves Rainey is the Director of Program Development and Delivery for North East Australia with the Department of Defence. Yves has over 14 years of experience working for Defence in the delivery of facilities projects, and prior to that, 5 years' experience working in industry and architectural projects. Last but not least, I'd also like to introduce our colleagues from the Defence Hub here in Townsville, Amy Lever, the Principal Industry Development Officer, and Nick Ferguson, the Manager. They work at the Industry Hub here in Townsville and help businesses to enter the defence supply chains by offering advice and assistance and information about defence project opportunities. So a warm welcome to all of our listeners today, also to our panellists, and we hope you find this session to be incredibly informative for you and helpful. Thank you.
And I just want to say a big thank you to Regional Development Australia, Townsville and North West Queensland and Department of Defence for partnering with us with the Defence Hub on this webinar today. A lot of you that are joining us today would have no doubt attended some of our events in the past, and this is our first online virtual event. So it's a little bit different to what we're used to, but it's very exciting all the same. So thank you very much to RDA for providing the platform today and for contributing quite heavily to this process this morning. If you have any questions today, please note there's a question and answer tab on your webinar platform there. Please pop in a question if you have one, and when we finish the formal presentations this morning, we will go through and answer those questions. Please just be aware that there may be some questions that we're unable to address today just due to ongoing commercial processes within the project, but please do pop them in there, and if we can follow up with you afterwards, we certainly will do so. I'm just going to hand it over to Mick to have a bit of a chat about what we do at the Defence Hub.
Cheers, Amy. Good morning to all those that have logged in today. By way of introduction to those that I haven't met virtually or in person pre-COVID, Mick Ferguson, Manager of the Defence Hub, half the dynamic duo that are the staff of the Defence Hub. Now, the Defence Hub was a 2017 Queensland Government commitment, and part of the role is working with local industries and preparing them, getting them ready for those opportunities with defence, both in a local market sense and also a global market sense. We provide practical support to North Queensland businesses, and a number of you would have seen or attended in the past a number of events, including Meet the Managing Contractor events, face-to-face liaison and project briefings. Other things that we work with some of the industry partners is things like how defence buys and Defence 101 workshops. Now, as part of this mandate, moving to a COVID-friendly environment, we intend to deliver a lot more of these events, working with partners as we are today, such as RDA, Department of Defence and Oricon, which I thank very much for this opportunity, working to facilitating those opportunities for North Queensland business in a virtual sense. As part of this, I'll now hand over to our good friends and colleagues at the ASMTI. If I can hand over and introduce Mick Riley, who is the Community Business Liaison Officer, who will talk about some of the specific opportunities for the ASMTI. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks very much, Mick, and welcome to everyone. I'll moderate the webinar as we go today, and it's my first webinar, so if you'll bear with me if you have any challenges going through it. As we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land wherever we're meeting today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'd also like to thank Regional Development Australia, and particularly Glenys Schundner, for organising this, and the Defence Hub at the Queensland Government, and particularly Mick and Amy for the opportunity to talk to you today. I'd also like to thank everyone who's registered. It's a great turnout and quite a wide range of companies as we address the ASMTI developments today. And what we'd like to do is give you an update on ASMTI, and particularly the Greenvale part of that project. We'd like to give you some tips about some opportunities arising under this. And we're fortunate today, and as you've had introduced, Ys and Dave, who will be talking to us. Ys as the Director of the program and responsible for the construction and infrastructure side, and Dave from Oricon also working on that project. Let's make no bones about it. Defence is about delivering value for money on this particular project. The goal is to make sure that that money is well spent and to maximise the delivery of defence capabilities. So understanding that's where we're coming from, and like you as a taxpayer, I'm cognisant of how that money should well be spent and the national security issues that are dealt with it. Defence, however, is committed to maximising the participation of local businesses. And we'll talk later perhaps a little bit about how successful Defence has been in that area, particularly here in the regions of North and Central Queensland. There are certainly lots of opportunities. Local businesses to local businesses, particularly in the construction and associated businesses. So what we want to do today is help you understand the opportunities for your business, if there are opportunities, and if so, how you can best get involved. Thanks again for attending this webinar today, but there are no guarantees that you'll get work from ASMTI simply by attending. What we do plan for you is to better understand the defence procurement process and how you go about understanding and scoping work for your particular business. And at this stage of the process, we won't be going into any specific details about packages within that works. That will come out as the rest of the project goes along. Locally here, I'm based with my colleagues, Defence Liaison Officer Sean Hawkins and Claire Royal, and I'm sure many of you will have met them here, based in Townsville, and a lot of time down to Central Queensland as well. We're here to support you and provide the latest information that we can and help you access opportunities, particularly within ASMTI. And it's great that we're here today working with State and with Regional Development Australia as a coordinated effort to support businesses. ASMTI is led by Commodore John Early, a very senior and very experienced Royal Australian Navy officer who's based in Canberra. Defence has a strong pipeline of investment within Queensland at the moment, with a number of major capital facilities and infrastructure projects that are underway. And of the defence contracts awarded in Central and North Queensland currently, more than 80% have gone to local businesses. Over $621 million injected into Queensland regional economies. I just want to give you a bit of context about ASMTI. The Australian federal government and Singapore have created this comprehensive strategic partnership. There are a number of elements and pillars within that strategic partnership, and one of those is to reinforce our bilateral defence relationships. The Australian-Singapore Military Training Initiative is a strong part of that defence relationship. Under this initiative, Singapore will invest around $2.25 billion in Australia to buy land and to develop the training areas. These are to meet the current and future needs of the Australian Defence Force and the Singapore Armed Forces personnel who will be training in Australia. And Defence is going to do that by expanding the area around Shoalwater Bay in Central Queensland and by acquiring and establishing a new training area in Greenvale. I just highlight that the Singapore's armed forces have been doing this type of training in Central Queensland in Shoalwater Bay training area for over 27 years to date. When the ASMTI initiative is finished, there will be the opportunity for up to 14,000 Singaporeans over an 18-week period to come and conduct their training here in Australia for the next 25 years. That 25 years hasn't started yet. So whilst today we're talking a lot about the construction, this is a long-term engagement and bilateral relationship. Right, so what's happening where we are at the moment? Let's start with the land. Defence has acquired sufficient land to both expand the Shoalwater Bay training area and to acquire, in the south of the Greenvale area, a new training area. Over 310,000 hectares have been acquired south of Greenvale. For those who aren't quite familiar with that sort of area, let me just say it's big. Now that it's acquired the land, the graziers and the properties that have been on there will be moving off. The time frame to do that will occur over the next couple of years, and there have been a number of arrangements, both adjustments or drought assessment arrangements, that have allowed the graziers to keep stock on those properties and to move off gradually so that they can do that in good order. And these arrangements will likely continue until the major works commence, and we'll deal with that later on. From an environmental management perspective, Defence has a strong track record in environmental management within the training areas. It has and will continue to commission studies to make sure that this solid commitment to the environment is maintained. Make sure that all training areas that are developed are managed to protect the environment, including the water resources, heritage, native plants and animals. That sustained environmental use is also very important from a training perspective to make sure that those training areas that have been acquired are ready and maximised for use by the ADF and by the Singaporean Armed Forces. So both in the national interest and in the defence interest, to make sure that we do maintain Defence's strong record on the environment. All right, what I'd like to do now is to hand over to the person responsible for running the construction side of the project. As introduced, Ys is the Director, Program Development and Delivery Northeast. That's northeast of Australia. She's part of the Capital, Facilities and Infrastructure branch, which is a part of Department of Defence. And she'll go on and give you some more detail about how to get involved. Ys, thank you.
Thank you, Mick. Before I go any further, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners, future, past and present, and specifically for me today, the Ngunnawal people in the lands in which I stand today. So what I'd like to do in the first instance is just run through the way in which Defence traditionally does its procurement and contracting for major capital facilities projects. So we are what they refer to as an outsourced model. Whilst I have a technical background, having an architectural degree and diploma of project management and other technical qualifications, that is not necessarily the case for a lot of other public servants. So we outsource those technical expertise through to what we refer to as our arms and legs on the ground, that being Dave Patterson, in this instance for the ASMTI project within the Greenvale region. So Dave is our project manager. He is what we refer to under the contract as our representative, and he is our agent. It's not to be confused with a superintendent. That is not the role that we engage with regard to a project manager. And a lot of you would be familiar with the superintendent role in terms of being an individual agent that basically moderates between the two parties. Dave, for all intents purposes, when he opens his mouth and speaks, he is speaking for the Commonwealth as directed through CASE, Capital Facilities and Infrastructure branch. So Defence is moving forward now with regard to the procurement of early works packages, which Dave will talk in detail, which is worth a little over, I think it's in the order of $27 million. Again, Dave will go into detail about that, where we are procuring some small packages of works. And then we are right now in the middle of the tendering process for the managing contractor for the works. So in May, some of you, or most of you, I'd like to hope, would be aware that we announced the shortlisting. There were 3 companies that expressed an interest within the ASMTI works at Greenvale, and all 3 were shortlisted through to the tender process. So the managing contractor contract is currently out to tender right now, and that closes in late July. What we will be doing is, following the closure of that, is in accordance with the Commonwealth procurement rules, we will be undertaking a very extensive review of that documentation in order to seek the delegates' approval in order to actually get that approved and anticipate award of the contract later this year. Now, that contract is set into 2 phases, the first phase being the development phase, where the design documentation will be carried out. And the managing contractor will be looking at targeting, as part of their projects, most likely a significant number of local designers, we hope, or Defence hopes, within their procurement activities through the planning phase of the project. Part of that drive is to also see that we have a contractor or sub-consultants and consultants in the development of design that are local, that understand local trade, material and subcontractors available within the market, that helps us to actually ensure that we're actually getting maximum opportunities for locals within the region to participate in the works. So following contract award, some of you may be aware that in Shoalwater Bay during the tendering period, we conducted what we referred to as a meet and greet with the managing contractor that was tendering at the time. As a result of COVID, that hasn't been feasible at this point in time. However, what the department is doing is, following contract award, we will be looking to actually set up and establish those meet and greets so that we can actually have you who are watching today directly engage with the managing contractor who has been awarded the contract, to talk to them about how you are able to actually potentially contribute to the work, what expertise you have, so that they can actually help use that information further to inform how they're actually going to be developing and then subsequently separating and managing the packages of works to be procured and then delivered over the life of the project. So why has the department selected the managing contractor contract form of delivery? The reason that we've gone down this path as opposed to a traditional form of delivery is the managing contractor allows the department to have maximum flexibility in determining the elements to be delivered under the project. So in this instance, Singapore and the ADF have an understanding of how they would like to actually utilise a new training area. But the fundamentals of that and the way in which the department, both Singapore and the Australian Defence Forces, are actually moving towards integrating new ways of actually training means that it's not a firm scope of works at this point in time. Yes, there will be vertical construction, there will be civil construction. We understand and we know these things, but the exact extent, nature and location is still yet to be defined. So what we do is we engage the managing contractor to help assist us through their technical expertise to tease that information out of various experts in order to actually establish a scope of works that can then be delivered across the project. So the managing contractor develops that design documentation as discussed. And then they are also responsible for coordinating the interface between the design and the construction activities. One of the major benefits that we also see from a transparency standpoint is that the managing contractor contract has what we refer to as an open form of procurement for the subcontracting packages. So the department actually sees the way in which the managing contractor approaches the market and their processes must broadly comply with the Commonwealth procurement rules. Now, when I say they must broadly comply, the only area where they can't comply with the Commonwealth procurement rules is advertising on AusTender, where only Commonwealth projects can actually advertise. Otherwise, they must comply with all elements of that. That means achieving value for money. Now, value for money doesn't mean the cheapest tender. Value for money means lowest risk profile relative to the cost of the project. So if you tell me that you are only going to have 3 guys working on the job and it's going to cost $4 million, but then there's someone else who tells me they're going to have 8 guys and it's going to cost $5 million, the guys who are going to have 8 that are going to have a better redundancy, better risk profile, are going to be better suited with regard to us spending an additional $1 million for the award of that package. Now, that is done with, as I said, Dave in this instance, who is those arms and legs, where there is a justification and the equivalent of a tender evaluation board that is done for each of the subcontracting packages, where there is a recommendation and then it is endorsed before they're allowed to actually award that contract. Under a traditional form of delivery, Defence would not necessarily see this. And we don't have the ability to make sure or confirm that there is fair and reasonable process, and that one of the problems that we see is that there is a continued and ongoing approach to the same subcontractors, trades and material suppliers, as opposed to actually going outside those usual supply chains. And that is the purpose of part of the local industry capability plan, which I'll go into in a moment. So one of the other benefits of the managing contractor contract form of delivery is that it has a reimbursable trust account. So we pay the managing contractor a fee. That fee is paid directly to them. The monies that are paid or that need to be paid to subcontractors are paid into a reimbursable trust account. Now, that means that there is a much higher level of protection for subcontractors from the standpoint of insolvency. What it also provides underneath our form of contract is Defence pays all monies owed and payable within 2 days. And underneath this contract, or the contract that will be awarded, the managing contractor will also be required to pay all monies owed and payable within 2 days. We know that over the last few years, there has been some instability in the market, and there has also been a number of primes that have asked subcontractors and material suppliers to sign up to security of payment legislation payment terms that are well outside of the 30 days within Queensland, and then obviously across other states that I'm aware of as well. It is unacceptable. The department does not condone it. And again, as part of this particular procurement activity, we can see the security of payment terms, we can see the amount of liquidated damages that are actually being asked, and the securities before they are released to the market, so that we can ensure that they are fair and reasonable, and that they also comply, in this case, with the Queensland government's security of payment legislation payment terms. So that's one of the great benefits associated with the managing contractor in terms of that open and transparent process. So there are what we consider to be, there are multiple different subcontracting types that we utilise or that we recommend for utilisation by the prime and through the early works package. And Dave will go into some detail about this, but underneath the managing contractor contract form of delivery, there are 3 contracting types that we anticipate will be used, and that being the design services subconsultant, the minor works subconsultancy contract, and the medium works subconsultancy contract. Now, these subconsultancy contracts have direct linkages back into the managing contractor contract. And we understand that through lessons learned that we have seen in Rockhampton through the local industry capability plan pilots, that being the ASMTI project there, as well as the Shoalwater Bay reinvestment project, that those that haven't actually done work with Defence before, and we are seeing positive benefits through engagement or positive engagement of a significant number of subcontractors and material suppliers that haven't done work with Defence before, that there is a knowledge gap. And so after today, and as part of some of the questions that will come out, we're working with Amy and other parts of the department to look at how we actually develop a specific training package that will actually assist locals to understand the contracts, understand procurement methodologies, and how they need to actually be preparing themselves to actually win a job. And then once they've won that job, how they're going about actually managing that contract. We consider and understand that our contracts are lengthy in their type, but they shouldn't be considered to be overly onerous. They're there to protect you. And we do that in terms of that linkages into the managing contractor contract, so that there aren't any unfair terms that are actually put on you that we wouldn't reasonably anticipate or expect of the managing contractor. So Dave will talk about it, but underneath the early works activities, Defence is doing direct engagement of smaller subcontractor packages of works. And under those, we are using what we refer to as the minor works contract and the short form contract. Now, these are probably closer to what you might see in terms of the short form Australian standards or the Master Builders Association contracts in terms of what you may consider to be the complexity. They are straightforward in terms of their deliverable. Now, all of the contracts that I've spoken about here in terms of how we would be engaging with you are available for you to have a look at on Defence's Defence Estate Quality Management System portal website. So if you type in Defence Estate Quality Management System, you will go through to what we refer to as the acronym, the DECMS website, and all of those subcontracts are available there. And as part of that development activity that I was talking about with the training suite, we're looking at establishing a specific, much easier area for subcontractors rather than having to navigate through the managing contractor contract, a specific click link that will very easily and readily take you through to those areas so that you actually have full access without having to attempt to navigate that system in its entirety. But as I said, that's part of what we're doing as a body of work and working with Amy and the Defence Hub in moving forward. So one of the things that I sort of skirted around before was local industry, the local industry capability plan. So in 2017, or August of 2017, the then Minister for Defence, Maurice Payne, announced the introduction of local industry capability plans and several pilot projects. Two of those pilot projects initially being within the Central and North Queensland region, being the Shoalwater Bay Reinvestment Project and the North Queensland Midterm Refresh Project. Shortly following that, the then Minister announced that the ASMTI project would also be incorporated into that local industry capability plan pilot scheme. Since that time, Defence has now rolled out the local industry capability plan as a mandatory plan to be provided by all contractors, prime contractors tendering to Defence. And the purpose of that plan has continued to evolve as we have gleaned further information through those pilot projects about updating the level and the quality of information that we're actually targeting as part of those plans. We have had some success, and in the majority it is in the success. And we are seeing increased local industry capability statistics, as well as engagement of contractors, as I indicated before, that have not previously worked on Defence work, which is a positive for the regions and falls in line with the government's intent with regard to maximising opportunities for local participation. So The point of the Commonwealth procurement rules is to dive deeper into the Commonwealth procurement rules with regard to not discriminating in particular against small to medium enterprise, and making sure that we're actually diving into ensuring that we're maximising those opportunities. So our expectation as part of the managing contractor, once they are awarded, is that ongoing engagement with the local region, once they've established the context of what capacity and capability is available locally within the region, to then divide those subcontracting packages against the various stages. So we've seen that quite successfully again down in the Rockhampton region on both of the projects there, where we have seen on a traditional project of those size, we've seen more than a doubling of the number of subcontractor packages that are available, where we haven't actually seen any decrease in what we consider to be the value for money generally for the Commonwealth in relation to local suppliers broken up into smaller subcontracting packages are still affording the same value for money as awarding significantly larger single subcontracting packages. So again, it is moving in positive steps, and we anticipate as part of the managing contractors, the 3 contractors that we are currently out to market with in the tenders, being in alphabetical order, CPB, Laing O'Rourke and Lend-Lease for their procurement and for the development of those local industry capability plans. Something to not forget, and whilst I can't go into a lot of detail about it, is in the Indigenous procurement policy. And that, whilst there is to some degree a focus within local industry around their local industry participation plan about how locals, including Indigenous, are actually engaged on the project, there is also the Indigenous procurement policy, which is a separate standalone plan that targets the way in which the managing contractor will actually be hitting the minimum engagement levels that are anticipated on the project, as well as how they will actually achieve stretch targets. I can't go into that in detail because there are commercial matters associated with the ongoing negotiations with traditional owners. However, I believe that we are moving in a positive direction with regard to those, and I understand that there has been some positive engagements through those traditional owners with local businesses. Now, something that Mick has said through a significant number of presentations is about how you can start to become involved, or how you can identify that you want to become involved in the project. Now, based on where we're seeing the packages within Shoalwater Bay, and whilst the project deliverables are not identical, they are similar to some degree in scope. We anticipate that the majority of packages will be valued between $4 million and $20 million in terms of the procurement packages. There will be some packages of works, particularly in terms of the initial startup activities and towards the end of the project. The benefit of doing something live, I do apologise. The focus being that doesn't preclude you from becoming involved within a project. My apologies, I will wait for a moment until the dogs settle down. So when you're actually engaging on a or when you want to become, or you identify that you do absolutely want to become in the types of deliverables and packages that will be made available as part of this project, just because your company may sit or have its annual turnover in terms of the size of packages below those does not mean that you don't have the opportunity to actually become involved in the project. And Mick has, as I said, been talking quite regularly over the last few years about how you're actually interacting with others, whether or not you're looking at coming together as a joint venture. And I would say, and I understand that as part of this webinar, that there are a number of you that have identified that you're happy for your contact details to be shared, in that you should be looking at those lists and identifying, hey, I'm a civil subcontractor. I'm generally looking in and around the sort of $2 million mark. There may be opportunities for me underneath the early works activities where those packages are valued between $50,000 and $4 million. Again, Dave will go into detail. That you actually connect with some of those companies that actually have a larger turnover to identify whether or not you can be part of their subcontracting workforce to deliver some of those larger packages of works. And we anticipate that there will be a significant number of you that might not necessarily be directly engaged, whether or not that's through the early works packages or whether or not that is through the subcontracts engaged underneath the managing contractor, but that you would pick up works, whether or not that is directly to us or through those companies or through other companies. And that could trickle down as far as cleaning, catering, or even transport of sundry services that are required, particularly when we're talking about Greenvale in terms of its location, the transit times to and from areas in and around in terms of what is local, and that the department has a push to ensure that we're actually maintaining safety on that site, the same as we are at Shoalwater Bay, where the transit times, even for a local, for example, living in Yeppoon or Rockhampton, that is only 80 k's away, when you include those internal travel distances, you could be travelling or driving in a vehicle for over 6 to 7 hours a day, which is untenable and increases the number of potential safety incidents. So there are a significant number of opportunities that are ongoing as part of the project. Now, I might hold there and pass over to Dave, who I know has been having some technical issues this morning. If he isn't available, then I will pick up and continue on with the technical content. Mick, I'll pass back to you now.
All right, thanks, East. Yeah, we have had some video issues with Dave. I'll just see whether he can come up on audio and talk to us there. Dave, I'll hand over to you on audio. Dave, how you doing? He's on. Okay, Dave, we're not getting you. We'll keep trying to get Dave, but East, I might wait. Dave, how are you going? Have you got us?
So things are very broken for me here, but if you can hear me, I'm happy to continue on. If you want to give me a nod.
Dave, we can hear you
All
well.
right. Look, hopefully I won't go over too much material that East or anyone has spoken to, because as I said, the reception here has been a little bit in and out. But I did have a few key points that I want to communicate through, just about the early works and the main works, which I think might be of interest to the broader group. I'll start with the early works first. So just to give you a bit of an understanding about what those early works are, we're talking about doing things like boundary signage, boundary fire breaks where we can for the training area, removal of infrastructure that won't be required for the defence training area, so things like internal fences and dams, sheds, etc. Also goes into some very basic civil works, might be just some road repairs, some hard stands, and contamination remediation. But when I say contamination remediation, we're really just talking about with the practices that have been out there on site. So it's like cattle dips, old rubbish tips, relatively minor in that respect. So that's the early works. And in terms of how they're being delivered, there's a concept of this market sounding that I will go into in a little bit of detail at the end. But basically, we're going to break this early works up into about 10 packages, and they'll be ranging up to around about $4 million. and they'll be predominantly done through minor and medium works contracts, which are on the defence suite. So East has talked before about where you can find those, so they're all very accessible. And some of those we might be doing as a design and construction package. Just the nature of the works probably lend themselves, might be design and construction for fire breaks, etc. When are those works happening, which I think is another key question. So some of those minor works have already commenced, but through 2020, we're anticipating the sorts of activities we'll be doing were more sort of signage, investigation, and we'll probably go to the market later this year with the fire breaks. 2021, 2022, that's where we start seeing some of the adjustment agreements finishing up. And that's really key for us because that allows us to get onto those properties and really start hooking into a lot of the bulk of the work, which is that demolition, that removal of that infrastructure that Defence will no longer require. And I would anticipate towards the end of 2022, that's when we'll see that contamination remediation packages to pick up those old rubbish tips and any cattle tips, etc. Probably around about that point in time. So that's the early works, and I'm just going to touch a little bit more now on the main works, and really that's the permanent infrastructure that we're talking about for the training area. So that's really a lot heavier in the civil works. We'll be trying to establish things for Defence doing its manoeuvres with its tracked and its wheeled vehicles. So a lot of hard stands, hardening of things like creek and river crossings. Some minor building construction in terms of the range control, which is just basically a facility where briefings are conducted. A lot of field toilets and associated hard stands for waste management will come into play. Camp accommodation, where we'll see basic kitchen facilities, buildings for accommodations of the soldiers, and a lot of tent slab construction. Vehicle washdown, storage, basic maintenance facilities will be included. Construction of urban tactical training, which sounds a bit unusual, but it's basically like small mock villages where the teams can do their tactical training moving through that sort of environment. A lot of earthworks associated with live fire ranges for setting up of targetry. A lot of ICT, so the information communications technology to go into enable Defence to use simulation, etc., through the training area. Storage facilities in general, and possibly airfield construction will come into it for fixed and rotary wing aircraft, and just a lot of areas too just being cleared and levelled for things like the parachute drop zones. So that's essentially the list of the permanent works which are associated with the main works for the training area. So how they're being delivered, and I know East has gone into a fair bit of detail talking about the managing contractor and how that's out to tender at the moment. So we are expecting before the end of the year that we'll see award of that managing contractor. I'd certainly try and reinforce the point that that managing contractor, the MC, they manage and they engage the trade packages for the works. So they're not self-performing the works as such. So what's key for that is that one of the evaluation criteria that we'll look at when selecting that managing contractor is their approach to that local industry and how they're going to get that local engagement. So that's an important point. It is up to them to design what these trade packages will look like, how many, but just very broadly, you're probably talking about in the order of 200 odd trade packages, and they'll be in that range that East talked about before as well. So sort of heading up to that 20, 25 million and everything in between. So in those contracts that you're talking about there, that's really the stuff that you can find in on Deckham. So the varying sorts of trade contracts, so the mask and the MESC, they're things that you can actually see and start to investigate and understand. So in regards to when those are happening, just to reinforce, the procurement of that managing contractor is this year. You can expect that through 2021, 2022, that is going to be the design period. And then extending into 2022 is when we'll expect to see the construction activity starting. And that will really roll out to probably about 2027 with some fairly continuous construction effort. The other couple of points that I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on, just to explain, because some of you might have heard some of these in previous meetings, industry briefs that we've given up in the Northern Queensland region, is the concepts of these capability statements and the market sounding as it relates to the early works. So just in relation to those capability statements, what we did last year was we engaged to try and identify local trades and individuals which were interested in participating on the project. So we ended up getting 116 responses to those capability statements. And how we're using those is that we're using them in two ways. So the first way is with the managing contractors, the tenderers. So they've all been provided those 116 responses that have been received to date. So that's just there to give them a head start on understanding the locals which have expressed interest in the works. So it doesn't mean they have to use everyone on that list, but it does give them a good start point, and they can do their own investigations as well into further local capacity. So that's how they're being used with the main works. And similarly with the early works, when we go to a shortlist tender, we'll also be providing those to the medium works contractors as well, just to assist them, because they have that same requirement for that local industry capability. The other thing I just want to touch on was the market sounding. So the market sounding is, it's just there for the early works. So what we did last year was go out with the market sounding, which is really to identify contractors now. So people who are able to sign up to a defence minor or medium works contract who'd be interested in the early works that I previously described. And it's from that market sounding responses that we'll be selecting early works contractors to participate in the tendering for that. Now that's still open. That's open right through to the end of 2022. So when there's a package available, we'll go to that list and look to select off that for those early works. And if you needed to find out any more information about that market sounding, you can jump in onto the ASMTI website. All the information about market sounding is still on there in regards to the form itself, how you submit it. There's a really good frequently asked questions package there, which is great for just also talking through the differences between the capability statements and market sounding and how they're being used. So I'd certainly encourage you to get in and have a look at that if that's of interest. So they were the key points that I wanted to talk to. So I think at the end there will be an opportunity for questions. So if there's any further explanation I can give, I'll certainly look to try and answer those. Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much, Dave. I just wanted to clarify one there. You said that the market sounding is still open. The capability statements, can people still submit those? No? All right, we'll chase that up and we'll get back to Dave on that. Okay, look, thanks very much to Dave and Ise. Just mute that microphone. Just to quickly summarise for Greenvale, the early works will continue until 2020, and Dave mentioned about the market sounding, that you're able to get involved in that. We expect the managing contractor for the major work from those 3 shortlisted companies that Ise has mentioned to be identified and engaged before the end of 2020. We expect in 21 that there'll be a design phase for the major part of things, with major construction starting in 2022, going through, as Dave said, till 27, 28. From 2028, we expect the full initiative to be up and running, and it will certainly start with Singapore training before that. And as I highlighted there, and you can see on the slide, before that they've been going for nearly 30 years. Can we just go back a slide, please? In that 18 weeks a year, we expect that to be broken up into 2 9-week windows, and the agreement lasting for 25 years. While still to be fully determined, the Singapore Armed Forces are well used to operations in Australia there from a number of areas, but particularly from the training that they've been doing in Central Queensland in Shoalwater Bay. There will be opportunities over that time frame for local businesses in a number of areas that might include things like supplying fresh rations and transportation to move backwards and forwards. In Greenvale, there will be opportunities once the major construction is finished in the sustainment mode of a training area, the way that all our training areas are set up. There'll be things like road maintenance, pest and weeds management, and a number of other areas that will continue while that training area exists, clearly for a long period of time. Just reinforcing that Defence is committed to value for money, and ESA's described what that means, not necessarily the cheapest, but the most appropriate and value for money for Defence. And Defence is committed to maximising the economic benefits locally for communities and for the industries. We've highlighted a range of areas, and Dave identified some places to go to find those in detail. But particularly, local industry capability plans are one of the key areas that Defence has used that technique to be able to do that and give the opportunity for locals to be involved in it. And this will involve both business and potentially, as this initiative increases, cultural opportunities for us to improve our good relationship with Singapore. Can I have the next 2 slides forward, please? I just wanted to highlight, next slide, please. And the next slide. Before we go to questions, in this pack, if you're interested in it, there's a pile of key numbers there that you're able to get in contact with us. And I encourage you to ask us any of those questions. As Amy said at the start, if you type in your questions, we'll have some opportunity to answer those as we go through now. Certainly from Eason, if we can keep Dave on those slides, we'll be doing that. But I think that's a quick summary, and I thank you all for being involved. And what we'll do now is answer any questions you might have that you've typed in, both on the webinar or more broadly in ASMCI. So as Amy said, just type your question in. We'll try and respond to those as we can. And I think as Amy identified earlier on, if there are some that move across into commercial areas, then clearly we won't be able to identify those. But if you give us a call afterwards, we can certainly talk you through those. Right, starting with a couple of the questions. The first one I've got is dealing with the breakdown of packages. That came in pretty early on. Can you slide up, please? I feel that that one has been addressed and particularly reinforced by the introduction of the local industry capability plan and the way Defence has gone about that. If I haven't, please give me a call on that, but it's been broken down, as Dave and Issa have explained, to much lower packages that have been there previously, and how people might get involved in that. The second person asked about a list of subcontractor packages. Now, we didn't go into detail for those, but Dave or Issa, I don't know if you wanted to, identify when that list comes out, where would people get that from the MC? Issa?
So similar to what has occurred at Shoalwater Bay, the managing contractor, once they'll do the initial development of design documentation, what we refer to as the master plan feasibility. That will actually inform them about how or what the works are to be delivered, and then they'll have an indication of how they might actually start further breaking down the packages. They will start in consultation with Defence, and again, we'll provide some of this information through Amy in the Defence Hub, what the nature and the breakdown of those packages is likely to be. So in the first instance, it'll be the nature of the packages and how they will be done. And I'll also take this opportunity to pick up on one of the other questions, and that was, the question was in and around, my apologies, just reading the question, whether or not the packages will be available to builders or only trade packages. So that's part of that development of the local industry capability plan and how the managing contractor will interact with locals. So it's not just trade packages, it's also works packages for local builders to pick that up. And that's part of establishing who's out there, what they can do, and then how the packages will actually be structured in terms of how they're going to the market. So throughout this procurement process, as Dave indicated, they've been provided a copy of the capability statements that we received to date to give them an indication of what is available locally. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, and that's just that initial step forward. So they'll develop a plan as part of their procurement, as part of their tender that they will submit to Defence that will identify what they consider to be the likelihood of the breakdown of packages. So towards the end of this year and into early next year, that's when we'll start to have that understanding of what those packages are, how they're going to start to be broken up, and how we start interacting with you.
All right, thanks very much, Ise. Moving on to one of the next ones, someone's asked about the land remediation package starting in late 2020. Yes, the answer to that from Dave is that towards the end of 2022 will be when that remediation packages start from there. Ise has answered the trade ones. The three shortlisted ones were CPB, Lang O'Rourke and Lend Lease. I'll just want to reinforce there's a couple of others that talk about how to get involved. So we've talked about the market sounding, and David's mentioned in detail. Lisa's touched on it. Dave's mentioned in detail. If you go to that, that's about people who think that they can do jobs directly for the early works contracts. So, and the other is for the managing contractors. And Isa's spoken about putting in those capability statements that's gone to them. You've got the three of them now that are in that process of going through their shortlist. And if you were a capable person who thought they might be able to do either a trade package or a work package, maybe now's the time for you to start thinking about that sort of stuff and how you might engage with them. And as Isa identified, or David did, the selection of that managing contractor that will be selected by Defence towards the end of the year. So it's a time that you could engage now with all of them and or afterwards to do that. Someone's asked about the definition of local. What he said in the local industry capability plans is that that's been left up to industry and business to identify what is their local industry capability. There were some guidelines given to for Shoalwater Bay, but at this stage, I'm not sure that we've given specific guidelines. The MCs are doing that, and local depends on so many variables and factors or locality. Lise, did you have anything you wanted to offer on that?
Sure. So the department does not define local, and the reason that we don't is because we currently have a fair trade agreement with New Zealand. So Australia and New Zealand, for the purposes of the Commonwealth, is classified as local. Now, as we've identified before, we clearly don't think that someone from New Zealand would be classified as local. What we do as part of that local industry capability plan is we ask the prime to identify what they think is local. Now, what we've seen, or what I have seen based on previous local industry capability plans that have been submitted, some choose, for example, to use a simple radius in terms of if you fall within a 50-kilometre radius. A lot of the projects within Townsville, for example, have utilised that 50-kilometre radius for projects at Laverack Barracks. and at RAF Base Townsville because of the size and nature of the market that's capable of delivering that.
Yeah.
For a project within Greenvale, we anticipate that they would look at the nature of subcontractors and material suppliers that are available within proximity to that location, and that they would come up with their definition of local. We do assess that as a value for money criteria, and that means looking at how they have actually identified that, what information has actually been incorporated in order to determine what local is.
Okay, thanks very much, Ise. There are a couple of specific ones there that people might want to contact Sean or myself or Amy or Mick, depending on who it is. Our numbers are there in the package if you want to give us a buzz. So I don't think we'll get specifically into those.
Quite happy, Mick. There's a couple of people have entered questions there, very specific. We're aware of what you do and who you are. We'll reach out for those specific questions and get you an answer and have a discussion about those. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. And I think that local one deals with a couple of the other issues that Ise has just, other questions. Ise has just spoken about those, that says how Defence is guiding the MCs to approach that. But I will say, I think the local industry capability plan has been a significant change within Defence's approach to engaging and its processes. And I think that's been very effectively used both here in North Queensland, but even more so in the ASMTI project run by Defence in Central Queensland. So that has been a significant change driven by the industry and taken up by the government. Defence has been enacting that, I think, quite effectively, and we'll be intrigued to see how that keeps going. But at the moment, I think that's been a very positive area. In terms of registering interest, I think we've spoken about those, and through either market sounding or through capability statements, and you have the names of those should you wish to go directly. I think they're the key points. Just before we close off, Ise, did you have any final ones from there?
So there was a question that came up earlier on surrounding insurances. Now, Defence is looking quite in quite a bit of detail with regard to professional indemnity insurance. And from a facilities standpoint, we have actually removed from the managing contractor contract a minimum level of indemnification insurance that is required. What we found is that when we specify a very specific amount, some companies don't necessarily have that specific level of insurance, and then they have to go out and actually procure an insurance policy that takes them to that level. So as I identified when I was speaking, one of the things that we do look at is that level of insurance that will be put within the subcontractors, the tender documentation that does go out. And our recommendation and how we will actually be managing that is to recommend that we don't actually put the limit. The indemnification insurance is assessed as a value for money criteria. So if you're delivering a $5 million project and you only have indemnification insurance for $2 million, that's part of that value for money criteria to say, hey, they're delivering $5 million worth of works, but they've only got insurance for $2 million. And that is too great a risk for the Commonwealth to undertake. So yes, we're very cognizant of that. Yes, we're looking into how we can actually work with the managing contractors and with subcontractors, because the last thing we want to do is to place unfair burdens or hurdles that small to medium enterprise in particular don't have the opportunity to actually acquire that level of insurance. Sorry, I'll just see if there's...
All right. Okay, so there has been some work commence on the early works. People have asked that. Can you scroll down a bit, please? In terms of the downstream substance package that we've talked about, they are more than likely to come through the Singapore Armed Forces is the way they deal with that directly. That's post any of the construction. for the Singapore Armed Forces training. In the training packages for the tender process, we mentioned that earlier on. When will they become available? I don't know if East or Amy, have you got?
I think East was might have some comment on that.
East, do you have any comment on the tender process, procurement process training?
So we're currently working up a package that we then need to actually pilot, which we will be looking at doing that down on the projects that are being delivered within Shoalwater Bay. We anticipate that there should be a product that would be released early in next year at the latest, which is well and truly in time to actually facilitate interested parties wanting to conduct in the design activities as well as the construction for the project. And we'll continue to develop and refine that as we receive feedback from industry as well.
Okay. All right. Look, thank you very much. I think there's one final one. Tender documentation from the MCs. Is there a standard way that that's promulgated, or will each MC have their own, or is that something we'll identify after the MC has been selected? Esa or Dave?
Each MC has their own way of actually approaching the market. So that will be articulated within their tender documentation in terms of how they will be approaching the market. And what the nature and extent of that tender documentation is. We would anticipate, again, that those MC will be doing road shows where they will actually be identifying what that is, where it will be advertised, what it's going to look like, what the technical accessible criterias are, how they're going to be applying technical points, so to speak, to that. And then how that actually ultimately feeds into the value for money assessment. So that will be further defined and further articulated as we continue to go through the life cycle of the project, obviously commencing towards the end of this year.
Thanks very much, East. Just one final one. There's some questions for the Shoalwater development. Lang O'Rourke is the managing contractor for that for specific areas and questions, and that's who I'd encourage you to get in contact with for those specific questions you're looking at supplying services or product to them in there. Look, I think that has finished most of the questions. The couple that we haven't been able to answer, then we're happy to have you chase up with us and or we'll try and get back to you depending on how much detail we've got from you. So I would just like to conclude now and hand back to Amy. Thank you very much for your time. Down to the next one, please. The contact details are there. Please give us a yell if we can help. Good luck with it. It's not for everyone. If it is for you and you think that this is an area that you could or would like to get engaged with, there is support out there to help you, and the contacts there will be able to do that. Thank you very much to the presenters and East and Dave from my side. Thanks very much for attending. And Amy, thank you very much.
Mick. Thank you very much, Mick, and thank you, East and David, for your presentations today. I think everyone would agree they were very informative, and I think everybody will be well informed to know whether this is the right choice for them and where they can go to find those opportunities. Mick Ferguson mentioned earlier the Defence Hub. Please reach out to us if there's anything we can do to support you through this journey. We're working very closely with the ASMTI team and Department of Defence to make sure that we can provide you that support. So please do reach out to us if you have any questions. If Mick and myself cannot answer it directly, we can certainly put you in touch with the person who can. So yes, please keep in touch, and we will endeavour to, as the process continues with managing contractor, and once they're appointed, you can be assured that the Defence Hub will be working closely with the MC and Department of Defence to roll out those industry events and try and get that connection between you and those opportunities to find out exactly what's happening. So thank you, everybody, and thank you to RDA again for hosting us today. We really appreciate your hard work, and look forward to catching up with everybody soon, hopefully face-to-face if everything goes well. And in the meantime, take care. Have a good day.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you.